Welcome to this week's episode of Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. Shiho Miller here from Warrior Concepts. And so, again, what we're going to try to do during this episode is shove almost 45 years worth of training into a high-level tactic and strategy class, right? So, title of this one, right, Advanced Ninjutsu Throwing Skills. What I really want to head toward, the ultimate goal of this, and we'll talk about it at the end, is how to quickly, right, recover from an attempt to jam a throw. Okay, so there's this concept within Ninjutsu that's called shiho nage. Shi for whole directions or ways, and nage is throw, right? So four directional throwing, but it's more of a principle or a concept than it is a technique. We have lots of throwing techniques, but anyway. So I'll mention a couple of these as we go along, but what I want to do is jump into this very, very quickly, okay? So anyway, I like to start off with a problem. So why not, right? So here's one that's voiced in different ways by different people, trolls that put their comments on the videos or whatever. I'm sure most of these people have skills and they know what they're doing. Often the problem is either they have a very limited experience base that they're operating from. What that means is they're always in the same type of fights. They've always been in the same type of fights. So, you know, like somebody who mentions, I don't ever remember being grabbed by the wrist in a fight or being grabbed by my jacket or whatever, right? Well, that just tells me that you've never been in that kind of situation. It doesn't mean anything about whether or not they actually exist, because in the realm of bodyguard work, in the realm of law enforcement, in the realm of bouncers, right, at clubs and whatnot, right, there's grabbing that happens all the time, right? Women's self-defense, that kind of stuff happens, right? So it means nothing other than that person's experience. But in this realm, right, what we end up getting in a lot of the comments is one, whatever the technique is, right, that wouldn't work. Okay, it's just a blanket statement. Other ones, you'd never do that thing to me, right? Or you do that to me and I will XYZ, okay? And that's all fine, right? But it's pointing to something that's very, very important that we need to get our head wrapped around. And I'm calling it this core truth of combat. And that is that no one except your training partner, right, is going to let you do these techniques to them, okay? So the core truth of combat is, right, no one will let you do your technique. Let you do your cool move. How about that? Okay. Core truth, right? That unless they're unconscious, right? And it doesn't have to be, and this is not about a conscious level thing either, right? And we're going to talk about some of these where you know, people think that, well, I'm going to distract him and therefore I'll get the edge. Well, maybe, right? That's a good tactic. But we have these unconscious and subconscious mechanisms that are operating that have to do with balance and all kinds of things, pressure, force, and whatnot, where the body will, at a bare minimum, right? We have these flinch responses, right? We just did an episode a couple of weeks ago on making the flinch response work for you, but how these kind of things happen, right? And they happen very, very fast, okay? So whether he's being strategic about it or it's just his body's autonomic response to trying to catch its balance or to resist force or pressure being applied against it or whatever, right? We have to remember there are these hardwired, I call them human defense mechanisms, right? That involve the amygdala and the hypothalamus and all this stuff, right? That the more of these things that we can know about, then we can tailor our training, right? I've also had people tell me in comments on videos, right? All this BS, right? You just need to put some gloves on and go at it, right? Because you're not going to be able to think about that stuff in the fight. And they're absolutely right. Just like the guys who say you're not going to be able to do that to me, okay? We're not going to be thinking about this in the fight, which is why it has to be a part of training and it has to become what a lot of people might call second nature or whatever, right? The way I describe this with my students is this is no longer something I do and is so much a part of who I am that I can't not do it. Okay, ninja walking is not just something you do in the dojo. It's what you do every time you walk. And I don't mean the, the cool little stealth walks and things like that, but the way you transition weight across your legs and those kind of things, right? So when your flinch response goes from being something like this to something like this, see, that tells you that your kami and all these mechanisms, all these skills are in muscle memory, because that becomes the new instinctive response. It becomes the new flinch response. Okay. Anyway, right. So core truth of combat is that no one is going to let you do your cool moves to them. Okay. So here's 3 points, 3 realities, right, for your training. Okay. One, let's change color here. Well, let's go to black, right? One is you have to acknowledge this. Okay. You have to acknowledge that truth. Okay. So we get it, right? There is no such thing as an unbeatable technique. There is no such thing as, regardless of what the sales hype of somebody's website promising to give you the number 1 or 3 or whatever of the, in 30 minutes, you'll be able to defend against any attacker. Good luck using that against a sniper across the street or whatever, right? Okay. So, but people want that, right? Because they want quick, they want easy, they want the drive up window version of things. Okay. They want to know that I don't have to put a whole lot of time, effort, and energy into this. Just give me something so I can believe I can do it. Right. And a lot of these people say they're not faith-based people. Okay. Anyway, right. So we have to acknowledge this core truth, right? So we have to understand that once we learn a technique, once we learn a skill at a base level, that's just the beginning, right? There's a whole process. In other classes, we've covered what I call, sometimes I call it my 0-point method, or taking a technique from classroom or dojo to street, right? And so what I have are, this 0-point line where it kind of looks like this, right? With a 0-point line, and this is where the technique goes. So, whatever, X, Y, Z, kata, whatever, okay? And then I have a whole bunch of lines down through here, right? So there'll be like a -5, -10. And so what all of these things are all the things that I have to get right. I have to learn, I have to develop, right? The coordination, the timing, all that kind of stuff, right? To be able to do this, the base technique that I'm being taught, correctly. And then there's a whole bunch of lines above that. There's a +5 point, there's a +10 point or whatever. And all of these are the things I have to do with this and to this to get it street ready, right? So +10, that top level, right, it's street ready, okay? So what are all the pieces, right? The footwork, how I transition my weight across my legs, what's my timing, where do my arms go, what am I blocking or covering against, all those kind of things, right? But often, we don't think about this stuff, right? It's just all a part of the learning process. If I just practice enough, right, I'll get good. Okay. And it's not to say that we won't, right? But the more of these things we can have to kind of guide our training, the better off we are, and the quicker we can actually make the process happen. Okay. Because a lot of these things will point out, I don't know if you were on this past week's Kuden podcast, where I was talking about why, all the reasons why the ninja's Sanmitsu triple secrets of success don't work for so many people, right? Went through a whole bunch of these things, but what we dove into quickly was this hierarchy of competency. I can't remember the social scientist or psychologist or whatever that came up with this thing, but it's a 4-tiered pyramid, right? And it takes you through unconscious incompetency. So either you don't know that you don't know it, you don't even know it exists, or you don't know how bad you are, right? You don't know the mistakes you're making, that kind of thing, right? So whatever, we think we're all that in a bag of chips, but we don't know the mistakes we're making, and we won't until we present ourselves in front of somebody who knows how to do it correctly, better, produce better results, or whatever, right? We get out of fantasy land. Next stage up is conscious incompetency, right? So when we approach these frameworks, okay, or we learn a new technique or whatever, right? Okay, see the teacher demonstrate it, looks pretty cut and dry, right? Okay, but at that level, we're at the unconscious incompetency stage. Okay. I see what he's doing, right? Know what it looks like. I go to try to do it, or I've never seen it before. I go to try to do it, and I realize my coordination sucks. My leg strength sucks. My joint flexibility needs improvement, whatever. Okay. So during that process, right, now I know what it's supposed to look like. I see seniors in the dojo doing it right. Okay. Can't be the kata. It's been around for 1600, 800, whatever years. Okay. So these people can do it, right? Okay. But next level is conscious incompetency, right? Now I know what I don't know. That's when I can start working on things. And then we hit a point, and this is with every single skill. Every single skill. We hit a level of conscious competency, right? I know what it's supposed to look like, and I can make it look like that, right? But again, we're still talking about technique. And this is where we lose about, 70 to 90% of people, because they assume conscious competency with street readiness. And it's not that they can't use it or bits and pieces of it or whatever, but there's actually a level above that, and it's the top of the pyramid, and it's where less and less people get to, because they confuse the I'm able to do the technique with I'm able to use the technique, okay, against somebody trying to beat, break, or kill me. Okay, so that top level is unconscious competency, right? I don't remember the last time I thought about how to do that thing correctly, because it's not that I can't get it right, right? Most people stop it, okay? Most people stop their training at the point where they get it right, right? They get it right more often than not, great, right? But the level above that, unconscious incompetency, is you can't get it wrong. You don't have to think about it. When I do a presentation at a university or in front of a corporate, C-suite board or whatever, okay, I have notes on their particular situation and how I'm going to address that. But the core of what I'm bringing to them, I don't have to prepare for that presentation. I can do it in my sleep. I know it so well that I can't get it wrong. Okay. So we're looking at competency here. And so what we're going to be looking at here is a piece that a lot of people, they don't do, right? They don't pressure test their techniques. Okay. So we're going to go through this. We're going to take a look at, one, what makes for a good throw, right? And core things, and where some people do it. And if we follow that path, okay, then we've got to be stronger than them, trickier than them, faster than them. You can't be the underdog and be stronger, faster, bigger, whatever, because if you were, you wouldn't be the underdog. Okay? We have to approach this from this perspective. That's the ninja's way, right? The ninja was always outgunned, right? They were not the ones in charge. They were not the ones setting the laws. They were not the ones, right? So how do you come out on top when you're not supposed to come out on top? Okay? So what I find is that in a lot of self-defense and martial arts schools that are focusing on self-defense, right, people get lost in the either spoken or unspoken assumption that it's going to be a fair fight, okay, or that it's about winning or losing and not about survival, okay, that it's about an even contest, that it's about I learned these things, of course I'm going to win. Yeah, okay. Anyway, so all right, so these three realities, right? The first one is we have to acknowledge that nobody's going to let you do your technique, right? So does that mean there's no point in learning it? No. We'll get to that in a minute, right? The second part here is that you have to train for resistance, right? You have to find out where in the technique and how might he resist, jam it up, whatever. Does he, as he's losing his balance, does he step, and that kind of makes it more difficult to do the next piece, and so I've got to force it? Does he, just because he's bigger or he has a better position or my timing is off or whatever, he just locks down, right? So there's no step or anything. He just locks down and it jams it up, right? Whatever. What are these different ways that can happen? That's not for this class, but anyway, and the third one is you have to learn to get him to give you what you need. Okay? Give you what you need for any particular technique. What does the technique require from the attacker? Well, he punches me and I just drive into the ground. Yeah, okay. What kind of punch, right? For this particular technique, right? So we'll talk about that more shortly here, right? But to get to today's topic, right, where we're going to be just like instantly countering a throw, an attempt to jam or resist a throw, right, to lock it up. We first need to start with what makes for a good throw, right? What makes for a good throw, right? So if you know what I mean when I talk about like judo style throwing, where people lock up in kumyuch and then there becomes this like push-pull battle and stuff like that, or wrestling or anything like that, right? Where it's like just two bulls going at it, right? If you understand what that's like, right? Or even in the training model, right? Where we kind of come in here and then, you know, I'm going to do this step-by-step kind of thing. There's a bunch of assumptions going on in this, okay? And what it can end up happening is with either that push-pull dynamic judo-ish kind of thing, or, and I'm picking on judo because people get highly sensitive these days if I pick on like MMA or jiu-jitsu or whatever, right? Feathers really flare and stuff, right? So we'll not mention them, or did I already do it? Anyway, so, or on the opposite extreme, they make the mistake of believing that the kata, the model, right? The way they're doing that thing is the way they're going to apply it out on the street, okay? I'm not saying that it's not a possibility, but when we're training for self-protection, when we're training for proficiency, when we're training for problem solving, right? In the very beginning, you need to lean toward probabilities, not possibilities. Well, anything's possible. Well, yeah, no shit. Anything's possible. Well, no, that's not right either. Okay. But we could use that as a general term, right? Anything's possible. I get it. But what's probable, right? In our Warrior Concepts mastery program, module 1 is it's all loaded with giving people skills and techniques that are designed to counter, to defend against what are statistically proven to be the most common attacks that happen across the majority of assaults that occur in the Western world. So why would you not start there? Okay. Well, because that's not how it was historically done. No, it's historically done based on a whole bunch of other reasons. Okay. So either way, right? All right. So let's see. I think I just threw myself out of order here. I did. Sorry, notes are in the wrong place. Okay, so where did I just go with that? Oh, the judo and the using the training model and stuff, right? Okay, so there's 3 problems with either of these approaches. Okay, one is that the technique or the kata or whatever you want to call it, right? It's not the fight. Just like the dojo or the self-defense class is not the fight environment. That doesn't mean you might not end up in a big open space with a nice flat floor and you're in socks and comfortable clothing and all that kind of stuff, right? Doesn't mean it's not possible, but it's not the fight environment. The kata, even the sparring thing that you do, right? It's not the fight, okay? Unless you're talking about a sport contest where, you know, there's going to be a winner or a loser. Okay, I'll give you that one. But if we're talking about a survival situation out on the street, okay, the kata is not the fight. Okay. 2, again, we're going to stick to throws here, right? You're starting from a static position and working on that technique with what I call a sympathetic training partner. Okay. What I mean by a sympathetic training partner is that they're helping you, right? Your best interest is in their mind, right? They're there to help you succeed. They're there to help you learn the technique. Okay. Even later on, as we start to resist, their resistance is there to help you, right? They're not the guy who's going to be grabbing you with the intent to beat, break, or kill you, right? We have to acknowledge that. Okay. But again, if we're starting from a static position, that also means that there's no dynamics, right? There's no balance breaking, there's no energy, whatever, which leads to number 3, which is you're doing all the work, right? You're giving him data to work with, right? So if we're starting from a standstill and I move to move his body, I'm the controller, he's the receiver. But it's supposed to be the opposite on the street. Okay, so shit. Now what? All right. So again, with number 1, right, where the technique kata is not the fight, right? The kata is the place to begin, right? It's where we start. Okay. With number 2, where it's a static situation and there's I'm working with a training partner, right? I have to think about this in reverse. Okay, he's not sympathetic. The guy that's actually going to be grabbing me, he's not there to help me. Okay, so one of the things that we do in the dojo is the training goal for intermediate students, not advanced students, intermediate students, is if you can surprise your partner, if you can catch your partner off guard, that kind of thing. The person who knows the technique and knows what you're going to do and what you're going to do next, if you can screw them up, you get a huge leg up on the guy out in the street. Okay, but that's still a springboard to the advanced guys, right? Okay, and for number 3, where you're doing all the work, I mean, if I move, I give him information that he can work with, right? That needs to be eliminated. Okay, so again, one of the first lessons I learned as a white belt is if you feel like you're working, right, when you're doing techniques, if you feel like you're working, 1, you are, and 2, it's wrong. Okay, the goal is effortlessness. Okay, so but how do you do that, right? Well, before we talk about how we do that, let's talk about what the model does teach you. Okay, and again, we're sticking to throw models today, but this could be any kata, any technique, any example that a teacher demonstrates, and you're supposed to go duplicate it, right? So what does a kata teach you, right? When it comes to throwing things, right, it teaches you to seize the spine or lock the spine, and immobilize the feet. Not yours, his, right? So the goal of 80 to 90% of our techniques, not just grabbing, grappling, wrist reversals or whatever, is to lock his spine. And if you lock his spine, you immobilize his feet. If he can't move his feet, he can't step, he can't kick, right? He's locked down, trying to not fall down. Okay. So when we're moving in, I don't care if we're doing ganseki nage, osoto nage, osoto gake, osoto rakari, I don't care what we're doing. The initial goal is to get him locked so that you can take him, right? Actually, you've already taken him, right? So the other thing that the kata teaches, or another thing the kata teaches, right, is recognizing balance and power lines. I don't mean power lines like electrical lines or whatever. I mean lines of balance, lines of power, right? Because he's going to be resisting on those lines on those power lines, right? That's where he's strong, on that line, right? I want to be operating off the balance lines, okay? Because no matter how much he resists, he can't protect himself on that side, in that direction, without shifting to turn that, what you originally saw as a balance line, he's going to shift. So now that's a power line and he can resist. When we talk about how to counter a throw counter, right, which is what shiho nage is all about. When we talk about how to counter a throw counter, we have to recognize that he shifted and changed things, and then where's that new line in that moment, right? I'm going to give you a really, really quick fix at the end. That's a good place to start as just a quick expedient, right? If you're working this type of throw and he jams it up, do this. If you're working this type of throw and he jams you up, do this. And when I say type of throw, I'm going to cut it down to 2 basic directions, not is it ganseki? Is it jigoku otoshi? It's not that kind of thing, right? You're not going to be thinking that way. Okay. So the model's teaching me how to lock his spine, immobilize his feet. It's teaching me how to recognize balance and lines of power, so I stay off of his power line, and I'm maximizing my work on his balance lines, so he's always off balance. Okay, always off balance, right? And on top of that, he can't adjust. Okay, so if I've locked his feet and immobilized his spine so he can't twist, torque, or step, and I break his balance, now he's fighting gravity and he's fighting his own body because his body won't listen to him. We're way ahead of the game. Okay. And the third one is I take the space. Right? I take the space that he needs. Take space he needs. Okay. He needs a certain amount of space, right? For stability, for balance, for power, to apply leverage, those kind of things, right? And if I take that space, if I move into it, then he has to go around me, right? Which in and of itself is going to break his balance. Okay, those kind of things, right? So the technique teaches these things, but again, it's the place to start, right? I learned all these things and more, right, to get up here to be able to do it dojo style, right? Do the kata, do the technique. But then there's a bunch of stuff I need to do that has to do with understanding how he can mess that up, right? How can he screw it up as I'm entering? How can he screw it up in mid-throw? How can he counter on the way out, right? Or recover or whatever, right? How does that change if it's the environment, right? Did I pick a throw that this guy, I have him and I'm bringing him forward, but he can just stick out a hand and put it against a parked car and that jams up the throw? Or did he do it by stepping and sinking, right? So there's environmental conditions, there's human conditions, there all kinds of crap, right? So there's all this stuff that I'm going to work through so that I'm reasonably sure, 99.2% sure that it's going to work against somebody who isn't affected by, in the dojo, we call this dojo syndrome, right? It's a nasty disease, right? Where everybody becomes a member of the Mutual Admiration Society, right? We're all equally impressed with each other's techniques because we're all doing it right. Meanwhile, we're supposed to be training for the guy on the street that's never seen our stuff, doesn't give a shit about our stuff, and is going to try to counter it his way, not your pre-trained partner's way. Okay, it's kind of like always throwing a classical punch. Meanwhile, on the street, the average Western attacker throws a right cross, right, and leads with jabs or goes into tackle routine or whatever. Okay, it's just not the same. Okay, all right. So that's what the model teaches. Okay, so the bridge between this, right, and starting to understand the dynamics to deliver a throw is in understanding that you get the attacker to give you what you need for any given particular throw, right? In a lot of cases, I don't care what, I'm not attached to favorites, okay? Because if you're attached to favorites, you're always going to be trying to do your favorite cool move, regardless of what he's doing. Okay? If you have no favorites and just have a toolbox, problem pops up. Okay, think about having to fix something at the house. Right? If all you have is a hammer, then every problem is a nail. Okay, but if you're trying to fix a cracked window pane, well, you can use the hammer to finish the job, but good luck using the hammer to put the new window pane back in. Okay, so anyway, right? So the one of the big things here that we covered was learning to get him to give you what you need, right? So remember I talked about in a static technique, right? You're initiating, right? You're breaking that thing, you're moving in, or you're initiating with the push pull, that kind of thing to break his balance, and then you follow up and do the ending, and right? It's supposed to be this pure model that initiates you into this thing, into this option, right? But the reality is that if you do that, you initiated. And if you initiate and you start moving him, he's going to respond to that. Action, reaction, cause, effect. I need it the other way around. Okay? So unless we're going to be doing I'm just going to manhandle him until I break his balance and I can execute my throw for points. Okay. If you ever watched a judo competition, right, you can drop somebody to the ground, but if it wasn't an official judo throw, there's no points for it. I don't give a shit if I do an official throw or not. My goal is to get this guy to the ground, off of me, restrained, or leaving him behind in the dust. It's not about points, right? We have to think about how being in a certain paradigm modifies your thinking, right? And your thinking determines your sense of reality. Okay. So anyway, right? So here's the thing. I'm going to erase this because I didn't make enough blocks on here. All right. So there are two ways to get him to give you what you need to catch him for any given throw. Okay. There's two ways, right? One, he gives it. Right? Well, what is he giving? Pressure, force, whatever, right? He's pulling, he's pushing, whatever, right? You need force or pressure from him, okay? And again, you get this in one of two ways. Either he does it, so he initiates, right? He grabs and there's a push to it and you ride that off and catch him, or there's a pull to it and you ride with that and whatever. Because when somebody pushes or pulls, when they're doing work, okay, they expect a certain amount of resistance, even unconsciously. Okay, if we looked at a box full of shit, I just did a whole bunch of moving, right? I look at a box or a bag or a crate or whatever, and it's full, right? First thing my muscles start to do before I even consciously think about it is I've looked at the stuff that's in it. There's this little math calculation that goes on, right? And then I grab it to lift it. But have you ever done that? But there was an assumption that you were going to need to put some oomph into it to lift it. And then you lift it and realize it's not as heavy as you thought. And now you've overdone it and you either have to catch it and catch your balance, or you got shit all over the place that you now need to pick up and put back in the box. Okay. It's that idea. Okay. So when he gives me that force or pressure, right? We're in a fight. He's assuming a fight. He's assuming resistance. He's making all kinds of conscious, unconscious, and subconscious assumptions, right? So he gives this. What I don't want to do is be countering. Like again, if you watch a judo match or a wrestling match of any sort, I don't care if it's martial wrestling or if it's Greco-Roman wrestling or whatever, right? Everybody's doing their thing, right? And they're trying to work the other guy. Okay. What we're doing is when he pushes or pulls, we let that happen because that's going to break his balance. So in that moment, when he breaks his balance or when his balance breaks, his body's fighting itself. It's fighting gravity. It's fighting inertia. It's fighting everything but you. And that gives you an opening to move in and catch him. Right. Then when he comes back to come at you to get you again, you move off the line of that incoming grab or punch. And that creates the next piece. That's what the kata is supposed to be teaching as long as we get past kindergarten thinking. Okay. So one way to get him to give you what you need, the most obvious, right? This is the omote, right? Omote, right? This is the obvious, frontal, obvious, right? Okay. The other way is you create it. You create it. This is the ura, okay? But sensei, you just said, don't be doing shit to him because he'll resist it. He'll counter it. He'll use it against you. Yeah, he will. If what you do here is what you plan on doing for the throw. So if I'm planning on doing a forward throw, so I'm going to catch him and turn to throw him, right? If what I do pulls him in this direction, yep, he's going to resist that way. We do this as human beings, right? If somebody pushes on me, I don't have to think about pushing back. My muscles fire to not get knocked backwards. If he pulls me, my muscles fire to not go forward. The muscles that fire are for the opposite direction, okay? So when I'm creating what I need, okay, if I feel the way he's set up and it feels to me because he's rounded out and he's holding me this way, right? He's in part depending on me for stability, but his weight's a little bit more forward. A forward throw is going to be much easier, okay? So, but if he's leaning back and he's got me this way and he's more upright and he's pulling and whatnot, more of his weight's going backwards, right? So what I'm going to want to do is not just choose the throw, but I'm going to initiate with the opposite action. So if I'm going to do a forward throw, I'm going to push on him first. When I push, what's going to happen? His muscles are going to fire to not get pushed backwards, which means they're firing in a forward direction. Or I push and he pushes back. He overtly pushes back. And when he pushes back, fan-fucking-tastic, right? Or if I'm going to do a rear throw, I'm going to pull him. So when I pull and he resists backwards or he pulls back, see, he's going in the direction, his resistance is in the direction that I want to go. This is the Kyojutsu Tenkan, right? Juxtapositioning or disguising truth and falsehood. I'm doing the opposite first of what I want to do in actuality. So his body responds to the initial thing. It's kind of like dealing with somebody who's oppositional defiant, okay? They have this oppositional personality disorder, right? You ever met anybody like this, right? You say something to them and that whatever you say, they're going to pick the opposite, okay? So how do you deal with somebody like that? Like, dude, I got a really good idea. How about if we do this thing, man? It'll be a really big benefit and all that. And yeah, no, I don't like it. And no, here's all problems with it and whatnot. Okay. And they're always this way, right? Well, how do you counter somebody like that? Okay. Well, this is verbal throwing. Okay. This is right. Because if you can't use your stuff, it's okay to use it for combat, but how often are you and I in today's world in a life or death match? But how often might we be in an argument or be up against a pushy salesman or be dealing with a friend who is always doing the opposite or dealing with a kid, teenager, whatever. You say one thing, they're going to pick the opposite, right? This principle of push when you're going to do a pull or pull when you're going to do a push, it still matters. It still works, okay? So here's a little bonus that I didn't plan on putting in this, okay? The first words you should say before the thing you want to do are, you're probably not going to like this, but, and then how about if we, so what are they going to counter? 90% of the time, they're going to counter the, you're not going to like this. So if you want somebody who's an oppositional personality type to agree with you, first, use some kind of word pattern that tells them they're probably not going to. They're not going to like it. They're not going to agree, right? This is probably not something that you would be willing to do, whatever, right? So because it's their nature to contradict you, they're going to go along with the thing that you laid out after that to prove you wrong because it's their nature to prove you wrong. So set up your communications in a way that they get to feel like they proved you wrong, but you got what you wanted. It's the ninja way. Okay. All right. Anyway, so he either gives it to you overtly, he's just being rough and whatever, right? And you catch that, or this is where a kata starts. Because in some situations, you end up in a position where it's a deadlock, right? He's trying to force you, and you're trying to keep that from happening, right? And then I might slip a shoulder or sink a little bit to let him fall forward, and then I can step behind myself and send him on his way. Okay. We have a lot of kata. Even there's a couple of sword kata. There's a sword kata called kirisage, cutting downward, where it duplicates a really common old Japanese samurai days kind of battle where both people threw a kesagiri, right, a diagonal cut at the same time, and the swords locked up. You've seen these in ninja movies and whatever, right? And it locks up, and you end up with this thing where it's a stalemate, and like if you make a mistake, his sword's going to cut you. If he makes a mistake, your sword's going to cut him. So how do I counter, right? How do I counter in a way that when I break free from this, I don't die from his sword, right? So what I do is I push or I kick or I do something that causes him to want to push harder. And when he does that, I pull one of these numbers on him. When I do that, I step into the space that the sword's not going to be passing through. So I have to know where that is, right? Experience, right? So I shift into that position and I don't have to worry about countercutting him. I don't have to worry about this big movie theater ching, ching, ching kind of thing. When he shoves through and I relax and I steer, my sword moves all by itself. So when he falls through and misses, simultaneously his neck, face, throat, whatever, runs into my blade. Okay? That's understanding the kata at a much deeper level than just step, step, step. Ta-da! Okay? Anyway, all right, so again, getting him to do, again, this all goes back to that natural hardwired kind of thing, okay? So how do we do this, right? I don't have enough blocks on here and didn't have enough space and real estate with this thing, but here's some training goals for skill proficiency with your throws, right? So obviously we're going to start with the kata model. If you know the shuhari model, right? This is just being able to do it, right? Copy, preserve, teacher demonstrates, you can copy that thing. You know what it's supposed to look like, and you can do it, right? So this is that third tier on the hierarchy of competency. You know what it's supposed to look like, you can duplicate it, okay? Just because you can duplicate it doesn't mean that you can actually end up using it, okay? But in the process of learning, right, goal number one is in developing our tactile sense, our sense of touch over everything else. Your eyes can be deceived, your tactile sense can be deceived, but your eyes, your hearing, and all that can be deceived way easier than their sense of touch, okay? And when we're developing the tactile sense, we want to develop for pressure or lack of, heat, proximity, those kind of things, right? Okay? I want to be able to touch him in a kumiuchi and know where his rear foot is, where his front foot is, how much pressure he's applying, if he resisted, if he softened up, right? As soon as I come into contact with him, I start reading, okay? And I'm going to trust this way more than my eyes, okay? Two, I want to get out of my own head, right? And what I want to do, right? So if you're really trying to get a handle on this thing, you have got to get out of your own head, lose preferences, and not want to do any given technique, okay? You do that, again, so we go back to number one, so you can feel what you need to do based on what he's giving you. If this were dancing, everybody wants to lead the dance. Everybody wants to be the controller. You'll be a control freak, then control him by letting him show you how to kick his ass. But people don't do that. People think of control from the perspective of force, right? I'm going to force him to do things, right? Either with an or else statement, threat of punishment, promise of reward, whatever, right? How about if I control him by letting him think that he has free will? Dude, whatever you do is okay with me. It's the core feeling in Jumonji no Kamae. Whatever you throw at me, I'm okay with. Because it's not only the warding off of all evil kamae or posture, but you're equally covered all the way around. I'm so confident in my kamae. I can win with this alone. So what you throw at me, I don't care. Because I can equally cover high, low, lateral, whatever. Okay? So, but again, we have to trust our technique. We have to trust our kamae. We have to trust ourselves. I find that a lot of people want to learn how to be invincible warriors. They're just loaded with self-doubt. That's a problem. Okay? Anyway, all right. So number one, develop tactile sense over everything else. Two, get out of your own head and stop having preferences. Stop acting like you want to do something because you're sending signals. Okay? Pay attention. Let him touch you. Let him throw things at you so you can see what you need to do. Which technique? Right? I made that mention earlier about being in your home and, you know, the sink springs a leak. You don't go buy a frickin' or rent a jackhammer, right? What do I need to do? Well, I need to turn the water off. I need to open this thing up and check the washer, check, whatever, right? Wear things off, okay? And then once, see, to take it apart, which tools in my toolbox? If I don't have them, well, I'm screwed, okay? Just like not having the right tools out on the street, okay? If I don't have it, problem lasts longer, or I have to go spend a whole bunch of extra money on top of fixing it because I don't have the tools, or I have to hire somebody who has the tools, okay? But let's say I have the tools, okay? What do I need? This screw, that wrench, that, and I only pull out of my toolbox what I need for this given problem. We think of self-defense and we think of combat from the perspective of problem solving. I need to understand the problem so I can apply the correct tools to it to fix the problem. Okay. Number 3, understand that all throws, all techniques, but in this case today, all throws are options based on conditions and variables. Okay. So like osoto nage and osoto gake, right? Osoto nage, and great outer throw. Sometimes we just call it a rear hip throw. And osoto gake, great outer sweep. Okay. In one, I push, pull, and I step through to check his leg. So as I turn, he trips over this leg. In another one, I step with my other foot to carry him farther, step through with this original one, and then kick his leg out, right? Well, which one do I do, Sensei? Where was your balance when he was moving you around or you initiated, right? You can start there. If my balance is on and my weight's on one foot, my body's naturally going to step with the other one, okay? If it's on this one, it's going to step. So you can start there and then start playing around with how each one gets created, right? So again, how many tools in the toolbox, right? So the whole idea is options. You have options, right? And then that leads to being able to make it up, right, as you go, okay? And I'll talk about that. So we're going to check, right here's this basic definition. We're going to talk about how that definition changes here in a minute, okay? So what do we do if he jams up the throw in the middle, right? So we're stepping in, we've got this ganseki going, we turn to do this forward hip throw, and he steps or locks down or whatever, or we're stepping in to do this rear hip throw, he steps back, catches himself, locks down, and it jams it up. What most people do is just keep trying to force the damn throw, or they let it go and it turns into something else, okay? Not that you can't do those things, right? But here's the quick answer. If it's a forward throw, we have to remember the balance lines, right? So if I'm throwing him this way, okay, he's going to step on the line of force. You broke his balance. When your balance breaks, I don't care if you stumble or not. You trip over a crack in a sidewalk, you tripped over one of the kids' toys, whatever, and you stumble without you having to think about it at all, your body takes the moving leg and puts it under you on this power line. You don't even have to know what power lines are. It puts it right there. But that was the initial throw line. He stepped on it, jams you up. Okay? So if it's a forward throw, right? I got this kind of thing. He steps to jam it up. I shift into him. So it's a push. Right? I push directly into his center. Here, right? He steps. I'm over here, right? So here's the guy being thrown, right? He steps, locks down. Power line is where he just stepped. Balance line is between the heels. So I just push into him. Okay? If I'm doing a rear hip throw, okay? So I'm being thrown, I step and I lock down. Okay? If it's a rear throw, we're going to pull. Okay? Try this. Okay? If you're in for the Friday virtual classes, we're going to be showing these and some other ones for like how to counter when things get locked up. Okay? But this is going to be the primary thing where we're going to give you plenty of examples of how 99.8% of the time, the answer to a forward throw that gets jammed mid-throw, he stops it. He's not going down. He's not countering by rolling. He didn't counter as you were entering. It's the throw itself. 99% of the time, it's a forward roll or a forward throw, and he jams it up. You just shift into him, which is a push, right? Into him, he's going to go to the ground. If it's a rear throw, 99% of the time, he jams it up mid-throw, you just pull him right off his feet, okay? Because you have to act contrary If this is the power line, front, back, that means he's this way, side, side, nice and strong, right? If he's that way, then the balance line always bisects that. So if he's strong in one direction, you just apply pressure in the opposite one, okay? It's not rocket science, okay? But you have to be able to do this by feel, because things happen so fast in a fight, you don't have time to think about it. The time it takes to process the answer, he will be out or you will be on the ground. Okay? So, or you can just keep doing what everybody else does. You know, that 1 to 3 steps just outside the cave and you're just doing slugfest. Just keep doing that. Anyway, all right. So the default expedient answers are push or pull when a throw fails, depending on whether it's a forward throw or a rear throw. Just start with the basics and you're going to find that this works a lot, right? But there are more, okay? Just like with the Kyonapo, right? These 8 techniques or whatever. The cool thing about the Japanese language is that when you add the word whole to the end of a number, you do something magical to it, okay? You do something magical to this, okay? So conventionally, from the omote, whole does mean way or direction, whatever, okay? So shiho, shi, forward, whole, direction, method, right? Forward directional throwing, okay? We'll leave nage alone, okay? But the cool thing about adding whole is that there's an ura, there's an implication, okay? When people look at the Kihon Happo, right? 8 fundamentals, 8 fundamental techniques. It's not literally what it means, but we'll just play the game for a while, okay? Happo is a contraction of hachi, 8, and whole, ways. But the Japanese have a hard time because they don't speak from the front of their mouths like we do. They have a hard time saying hachi ho. So it becomes happo, okay? 8 ways. But this works for roppo, which is a contraction of roku ho, 6 ways, right? It's just very clean with shiho, okay? But shiho extended, which is always the goal, we go from 4 directional, which is a place to start, to infinite directions. That means that you can throw somebody in any direction based on what's going on, because you don't have to think about how to throw somebody anymore. You're in that level of unconscious competency. You don't think about it, okay? So there are, again, there's more ways to look at this than just this 4 ways, because I wanted to get to this, okay? An example of this in the scrolls, right? In the teacher scroll, in the Shidoshi scroll, is with Ganseki, right? Ganseki nage, the forward, throwing a big rock, throwing a boulder throw. Ganseki has 4 variations that students are given, okay? And these have to do with this kind of resistance idea, right? Just gave you something very quick and clean here. But with a Ganseki, you have Ganseki nage, throwing the big rock. That's the ideal. Then you have Ganseki otoshi, right? I go to throw him, he steps and jams it up. So remember that push-pull? I step out and turn it into Ganseki osai, right? Becomes a pull. It's an armbar pull that brings him down onto his chest, right? If he jams it in a different way, right, it becomes Ganseki otoshi, where it gets jammed up and I kick the leg out from under him and now he drops onto his chest. So it's dropping a big rock. Ganseki nage, throwing a big rock. Ganseki osai, pulling a big rock. Ganseki otoshi, dropping a big rock. And then there's Ganseki ori, breaking a big rock. I'm in a position where he jams it up and either my arm to his arm, my leg to his leg, or ideally arm and leg together, I snap through the elbow and knee joint and I break him in place. Okay? So again, it's shiho nage, but it's variables and conditions. Okay? Well, which one do I pick? Experience is going to tell you that. First, you have to learn all 4 and be able to do them correctly. And then they become variations of the ideal, because you don't know what the hell's going to happen once you start the throw. You don't know how he's going to resist. You don't know where you're going to end up. You don't know how his arm's going to be laying into your arm until it happens. And the moment, remember tactile sense, the moment you feel that, you will know. You won't have to think, Osai. You won't have to think about that. You will know. Okay? But again, that comes from proficiency and leads to efficiency. Okay? And it all leads towards shiho nage, going from 4 directional throwing or 4 variations of a throw or whatever to he's going. Okay? And that's the way it works. Okay? Anyway, we will be looking at many of these things in actual physical technique form during the Friday virtual class. There's the link. You can go over to the page, sign up for the class. It's a 75 to 90-minute class. It's $4.99 US. Or, for some of you guys that keep signing up for it, I don't know why you don't still click on the blue link below the button that takes you over to the Ninpo Masterclass enrollment page. And that way you can be in on the Tuesday and Friday virtual classes. I don't care what your work schedule is. They're always recorded, right? And for less than $50 a month, you get, 8 or 9 classes, 75 to 90 minutes each on all, not just these topics, but intermediate, advanced. We rarely do basics in those classes, right? If you're looking for basics, that's our Foundations of Ninja Self-Defense course. I'll make sure that there's links in the description areas below the video. But, for some of you, this is just, you're going to add this to what you're already doing and you're going to rock and roll. For other ones, you're going to need some examples. So we've got these classes that you can jump into. And for other ones, come on, man, you've been sitting on the fence long enough. Let's go. Okay. And if not with me, with somebody, right? Okay. So let's not be, what would we call that? Instead of masters, right? I call them wasters or one-asters. Okay? And I don't mean an ass, right? I mean like a wannabe. Okay? Here's a wanna master, wanna be a master, okay? Stop being that. Okay? I mean, you can be anything you want, but if you could be anything that you wanted to be, right? Why not be a ninja? And look, this is an example of anybody can do it. Okay? If I can make it to Dai Shihan, you could at least make it to first degree black belt. Just saying. All right, that's it. I'm going to get off my pedestal. I'll see you next week on Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday.